Hi, everyone. Welcome to another edition of the Seforim Chatter podcast. On this episode of the podcast, I'm going to be joined by actually two guests. Rabbi Shimon Szimonowitz, who is the Rosh Machon of Machon Aleh Zayis, and who actually it'll be his first time on the podcast because he was actually one of the original guests in Seforim Chatter when we were on Twitter Live at Periscope a long time ago. So we'll be talking to him and Rabbi Yaakov Juravel, who is Reish Koil, and he is just a mechaber of the newly published Sefer Mincha Ketana, which Machon Aleh Zayis worked together with. So first of all, thank you, I guess, both of you for joining me.
Thank you, Rav
Koil, thanks for having us.
Okay, so let's start off with you, Rabbi Szimonowitz. Let's start off a little bit because we had you on. So a while back, that episode we discussed Seforim that you were working on. I as far as I recall, that we discussed some Seforim that you had worked on, Seforim that you had published, and process of publishing. So still, I think I still hear from people. Just recently, someone told me they listened to it, they really enjoyed it. So people can go back and find it all the way in the beginning about how the process of publishing a sefer, etc. But recently, just I guess update us before we can get to this later on in the episode. But Seforim that you've published recently, your process of working on now. What's the current state of the Machon right now?
So first of all, I want to tell you, it's very often I get a phone call. Someone calls and says he wants to do a sefer, and I ask them, "How do you find out about me?" And it's not seldom that person says that they heard the podcast on your podcast from Twitter. As a matter of fact, sometimes people come, we do a sefer, like sometime in the middle of the process, I say something and say, "Oh, you said that in the podcast." So even if some people may not have found me that way, but they listen, and I got a lot of regards. We're actually currently working on a project from someone from St. Louis, that the only way he found me was through your, don't bill me for that, but I have to tell you, that, full disclosure, that I got a lot of benefit from being on your podcast. And I hope that your listeners got a benefit from that as well. Regarding Seforim that we're publishing right now, I generally don't like to disclose anything in advance if it's not my own project that I can control and give out information. I've gotten into trouble once when I did say something that I gave out information I should not have. People are sometimes very worried that someone's going to take their idea away, or they don't want people to know about it. So I will not say things that are, early in the process, but the things that are actually coming out right now, I'm already advertising about that, so that I can mention. Seforim that are of public interest, I can mention, of course, first and foremost is the Mincha Ketana from Rabbi Juravel. It's probably a sefer that generated, I don't know if it's the most interest, but I don't want to make a statement like that, but he's definitely the candidate to be one of the most popular Seforim. The listeners will know more about it soon, and right now they don't know what we're talking about. But it's a very, very, very interesting sefer. It's a type of sefer you see it from far away. You want to go pick it up and see what it is. But that's a sefer that's been out. We're doing our second printing, and I am afraid we're going to have to do a third printing soon. And we did a high quantity of each one. But besides for that, right now in the works, two Seforim from two Gedolei Achronim. There's a Yungerman, a Chassidish Yungerman from England. His name is Rabbi Ostreicher. He's putting out Shuvas Beis Yankiv, one of the Gedolei Achronim. The brewer brings him, earlier poskim all bring him. He has some interesting shilas that he's famous for, and very, very important achron. And basically, Rabbi Ostreicher himself did the work of a full machon in doing the research and putting together all the marmakaimis and reworking the Seforim, finding kisvei yad from Kiveger and others. That's a very interesting sefer that will be coming out. I think it should become pretty much a staple for any serious yeshiva or Beis Medrash library. And then we're also putting out the Magen Avis, that Chashver Rav and Rosh Hashiv from Monsey, Rabbi Kagan, he's putting out the Magen Avis Ramat Chabanet, very, very important staple, a basic sefer on Shabbos that is very difficult to learn sefer. Perhaps that's why it's not as popular as it should be. And Rabbi Kagan worked it over, and we edited it. We worked it over ourselves as well, and it's coming out beautifully. Those are two Seforim that would be of public interest. That's in the Seforim world. In the book world, one interesting thing that I just held it in my hand for the first time, so it's worth mentioning. I will not take up too much of your time. Is the healthcare facilities, halachas of healthcare facilities. Shlomo Dickman just put out a book, a sefer. Actually, it's in English. I'm calling it a book, and it's the halachas, which is very, very pertinent to people today. A lot of people in the healthcare, whoever's not a real estate, it's in the healthcare business and healthcare providing business. And there's so many shilas that come up over there. For example, just to give an interesting one, having a chapel there, having from another, if it's not Orthodox or if it's a church or it's a mosque, place of the Zara, let's bring a Zara to your house, right? These are such just one tipa shabiyam of the questions, and the Shlomo Dickman did an amazing job. We worked together with other rabbanim and putting it out. Those are just I would say three svarim that's kedai for people to look into. But that's really I would give you the whole night telling you all this. I mean, just today I think 5 new svarim came, so I can't tell you every single sefer, but that would be something that I get. The idach zil gemor. I think R Juravel didn't just come here to hear me talk the whole time, so I'll give him a little chance now too. Not the whole time, but yeah.
So first of all, fascinating. I want to point out for the listeners that may not be familiar with you or your work, that with him, Machon Aleh Zayis, listeners may think of like Machon Yerushalayim, Masada Rav Kook, like a Machon that goes and commissions works. That's not what you do.
We're much bigger than that. Much bigger than that. But go on.
But I just want to clarify exactly. That's not in general what you do. I mean, there are some projects I do want to ask you about later on, maybe after we talk about minchaketana, that you have done recently. But in general, what you people, like you said, people they have a work that they've edited, they want whatever you do from A to Z. But if people want research, but a lot of these, I'm speaking for you, but a lot of these things, a lot of these things you do layout and typesetting and printing and cover design and all of that. So I just wanted to clarify just so people understand what exactly it is. But
the fundamental difference between Machon Aleh Zayis and the other Machons that you mentioned, I don't want to give them extra airtime, but no, that's joking. The Machon Yerushalayim, Mosad Rav Kook, and the Art Scroll, first of all, they're a little bit longer in the business than I am, a few decades ahead of me. Besides for that, the fundamental difference between us is that Machon Yerushalayim initiates projects. They say, Klal Yisrael Chuvas Rambam, and they raise money for it. And they do wonderful work. I use their svarim all the time, of course, and the same things as Masad Rav Kook. And of course, the same thing as for Art Scroll. They initiate projects. They see what people need. Oiz V'Hadar is another example of that. They find what people need, what's a public interest and public, a real need, and they fill that need. And how do they fill that need? By raising the funds, raising the money for it, and paying people to work for them and do it. And then they produce unbelievable products. That's not what I do. I do that sometimes a little bit. What I do is, as you know yourself, as I said, I don't disclose other people's projects, but if somebody wants to work, has his own project to put out, is whether, just example, a good one like G'dolei Achronim, write a sefer, someone wants to work it over, he found some kisvei yodis. I stick to what I say. I don't disclose other people's projects. And they come to me and I help make them happen. And I'm happy. I like to believe I do as good of a job as any of the other Machon in the end product. The difference is who initiated it and why it's being done. For example, Rabbi Juravel Sefer, the Mincha Ketana, it was his brainchild, his genius, his originality, his work, his idea. He came to me to help me implement. I help him implement that. Not that I initiated it or I thought of that. I don't take credit for that. Machon Yerushalayim, my conscious, when they came up with the Minchas Chinuch, the way they did it, and anyone my age and a little bit younger knows that there was no bar mitzvah. You didn't get 3 Minchas Chinuch in Machon Yerushalayim when it came out, because they just had an unbelievable idea of taking the Minchas Chinuch, which was hard to read, and all the Rashi Tevis in the old print, and it was also like sometimes a dead end. He asked the Shiloh, where do we go from here? And they went and they reset it with Mar Mekaimis, opened up the Rashi Tevis, made it mamish Shulchan Aruch Muchan Lechol. They did that, and they made the Minchas Chinuch tenfold more popular than it was before. So that's what they did. They initiated it. Rabbi Juravel initiated his own project. I'm going to let him introduce his own project. And he just came to me to help him implement it. That doesn't mean that his end product is any less than their end product. It just means how the relationship between the Mechaber and the Machon is different in these two situations.
Okay, good for the clarification. Good, we got that clarified. Now, I'll also mention, we'll get back more to Machon Aleh Zayis, specifically later on, hopefully. And I'll mention right away, there is a website now you have, and there's also your email address. I'll include those things in the show's notes. Just mention that right at the top. Okay, Rabbi Juravel, let's get to you. So we have the Sefer Mincha Ketana, and we've mentioned Minchas Chinuch. So I mean, we can talk about it, but I mean, you'll introduce it more than me. But I'll just tell the listeners, it looks exactly like the Minchas Chinuch. It has the same cover as the Machon Aleh Minchas Chinuch, same layout, same font, same everything, and it's on the Mitzvahs D'Rabbanan as opposed to the Chinuch and the Minchas Chinuch. So, where did you get this idea? Why did you decide to do this? And for the listeners who have seen this, or who are thinking you haven't seen it, wait, how did you take the cover? How did you copy the font? We'll get to that much later. But now for the substance, what's the Sefer? Why did you decide to do this? How did you go about doing it?
So the Minchas Chinuch needs no introduction, right? So I guess in case someone wants, there was a Hasidic Rav, actually. He was actually the brother-in-law of the Divrei Chaim Tzad. He was almost a Hasidic Rebbe. He lived about 150 years ago. And he published a sefer anonymously called Minchas Chinuch. The Chinuch, who was one of the Rishonim, we don't know exactly who he was, wrote a sefer for one of his kids, which goes through the Tarek mitzvahs, explaining some of the reasons for the mitzvahs, some of the halachas. And the Minchas Chinuch, wrote a full, not only a pirush, but just a really full sefer on it. And it took the world by complete storm. It's the only sefer that, at least I'm aware of, that there's no, Hasidish, English, Polish, Litvish, Briskish, Sfardish. There's no other sefer that I'm aware of that enjoyed such popularity, that was written so late in the game. The Rishonim is something else, but something that was written 150 years ago that enjoys such popularity among every segment of Klal Yisrael is very, very rare. And the reason for that, other than his, obviously after Dishmaya, is he obviously came up with not only such novel chidushim, but also a certain format that was extremely appealing. So very often when someone will ask a shaila, what a natural response would be, oh, that's a Minchas Chinuch kind of question. Or that's like a Minchas Chinuch kind of chiddush. So it actually happened. It was about maybe 4 years ago. And we were, yeshiva guys have things they like to discuss, right? There's always like yeshiva guy discussion. One of the things I like to talk about is Stella D'or cookies. Stella D'or cookies, I'm sure, are we the only one to call Strommel cookies? Right? Stella D'or cookies are, I don't know, I grew up on them. I think recently it came to people's attention that it might not be Pas Yisrael, and are you allowed to eat it or not? So I decided, I want to look into this, just as a matter of, I'm not going to, obviously, whatever a Rav, you could ask a Rav, you could pass in a shayla. This doesn't seem to be clear. I want to look into it. So a friend of mine who was aware of what I was doing asked me maybe 3 days into it, so where are we holding with this? So I told him, for now, from what I could tell, it seems that even Stella D'or himself could eat this. So, like I said, it's jokingly. So he tells me, oh, you mean if he became a ger? I don't know if there's such a person, but that was a joke, right? So I said, that's an interesting shayla. What happens if a guy bakes a cookie and then he becomes a ger? Could he eat it? So he says, you got to look it up in Minchas Chinuch. This is a Minchas Chinuch kind of question. So I'm like, well, there is no Minchas Chinuch. It's a mitzvah d'Rabbanan. He's like, well, you got to write one. So I was thinking about it, and so I got to give it a try. I went through the sugya of, Bishal Akum, Pas Akum. We came up with all sorts of Minchas Chinuch, quote unquote, style shilas. Tried to look at it the way the Minchas Chinuch would look at it. I actually set it up on made a Word document with like a Dropbox, and I brought it to to yeshiva where it was. I brought it to Kil, and I showed it to some of my friends, and they loved it. So that's when it was born. And since then, we worked, very, very hard. And I'll tell you about it later, exactly all the different stages that went into it. But that was how it was born.
And maybe explain a little bit, just for listeners, what you mean by Minchas Chinuch. So I don't know if you have an example. You can explain what you mean by that, what the Minchas Chinuch does, and therefore what you try to copy, emulate, so to speak.
So what the Minchas Chinuch does is he's going on the Tarek mitzvahs deraisa, right? So he'll take a mitzvah, for example, the first mitzvah, right? The first mitzvah in the Torah, the way the Chinuch has it in Parshas Bereishis, period of to have children, right? So the Minchas Chinuch, if you have a halacha sefer that talks about the shayla, that talks about this mitzvah, so they'll go through different halachas and how you're makayim it and when you are, when you're not. The Minchas Chinuch has a completely different approach. His approach is the way he looks at a mitzvah, or the way he looks at almost anything, is first of all, if there's anything that could be common or uncommon, or uncommon, that could be, he wants to know what will be the halacha in that case. That's number one. Number two is he tries to figure out what the gather of that halacha is. For example, Pir Rivya, is it to try and get married, try to have kids? Are you only Mekayim it once you have kids? What happens if you try? What happens if he was a guy when he tried to have kids and they're actually born when he was a yid? What happens if you have someone who's a Chatzi Evet, Chatzi Ben Chayrin? He's a half slave. He was owned by two people. He was freed by one. Now he's a half yid. Now he's a half guy. Is he Mekayim the mitzvah? Does he need 4 kids instead of 2 kids? According to the Mandamar, they need 2 kids. This is how he looks at it, and he goes on and on and on. He has many novel chidushim, many interesting shilas, which I guess we would call interesting, just because many of them are many of his cases are very uncommon. He goes through, he goes through the mitzvahs very comprehensively. He goes very often has nafkaminas for the different reasons of the mitzvah that will come out different chidushim. The Minchas Chinuch is not a halacha sefer. He's not trying to come and paskin halachas. He is coming and trying to understand, based on everything we know about the mitzvah, what comes out of that mitzvah. So when I'm talking, for example, about Bishal Akum, right, the mitzvah that the Chacham said that you're not allowed to eat something that was cooked by a guy. So the way we would look at it in the Minchas Chinuch's kind of eyes, the way we would look at it is not just open a sefer and see what's the halacha, what they say, if you have a can of tuna, if Moshe Feinstein is matir it or not, that would have almost no place in the Mincha Ketana. What we would do is deal with all sorts of either interesting scenarios or different cases, different chakiras, different questions, trying to understand exactly what the mitzvah is, when it applies, when it doesn't apply,
So let me.
I could go on and on in different examples, but I think this will explain the point.
Perfect. So
I think what R Juravel is trying to say is that it's not a practical halacha sefer that's going to tell you what you're allowed to eat, what you're not allowed to eat. It's really a way of studying the essence of the mitzvah or the din by bringing out different scenarios and discussing what the halacha theoretically would be in that situation. That will take the reader that it's thought-provoking to make you think about, so what is the essence of the mitzvah, right? It was when you asked the question, like the example he gave, if someone had a child before they converted to Judaism, now they converted, if they're kind perivivia, that makes you say, what's the essence of that question? The question is, does that mean, as the mitzvah is to have children, he has a child, so he did the mitzvah, or is the mitzvah to work on having children, to go and procreate, and then he procreated before he was a Jew, so he did not fulfill the mitzvah as a Jew. That takes you to the heart of the mitzvah, and not just the practical ramifications or the applications of the mitzvah. But I feel that he undersold himself, Rabbi Juravel. I want to mention that there's 2 parts of the Minchas Chinuch. Like you mentioned, the Chinuch was written anonymously. One of the Rishonim, he's suspected to be the Ra'ah, no? A lot of people who might have been the Ra'ah. And he wrote a mitzvah. Rabbi Juravel said he did it for he wrote a sefer. He said he did it for his children. But it's a wonderful, wonderful format. It's a systematic treatment of all the Taryag mitzvahs, where he first says what the mitzvah is, what exactly are you supposed to do, what is the shirosh mitzvah, meaning the root of the mitzvah, meaning the reason behind the mitzvah, why the mitzvah came to be, the dinei ha-mitzvah. Just a little sampling of the halachis, and then the chinuch goes and tells you usually who it applies to and when it applies. He sticks to that format pretty consistently. Rabbi Juravel did the same thing for mitzvahs d'Rabbanan. The chinuch didn't count mitzvahs d'Rabbanan because the Taryag mitzvahs, like the Rambam famously says in Shor Rishon, they're not supposed to count the mitzvahs d'Rabbanan. They don't count the Taryag. So the Rabbi Juravel is doing Mincha Ketana, meaning as opposed to the Minchas Chinuch, which is the Minchas Chinuch. This is the Mincha Ketana, the mitzvahs d'Rabbanan, and over here he goes to each one Rabbanan, and he does, which is unbelievably creative because the chinuch wasn't working in a vacuum. The chinuch had the Rambam Nervuchim spoke about Talmiyah mitzvahs, and he took a lot from there. Rabbi Juravel on his own went to each mitzvah and found what is the shorish of the mitzvah. What is the reason behind the mitzvah? That's another part of the chibur that he didn't discuss at all yet. That's the chinuch that he himself wrote a chinuch. On that chinuch that he himself authored, which imitates the chinuch, he then went and imitated the minchas chinuch, and as he described, he went through all the minchas chinuch. I feel that's you left out the whole chinuch part, no?
Right. So the chinuch is actually much more of a likut, because the chinuch, whether or not he was the ra'ah, he was definitely a rishon, right? And he definitely was able to, the minchas chinuch very often talks about the chinuch holds like this, the chinuch holds like this. If I'm writing a chinuch, I obviously can't write anything on my own. You can't write something and state it as fact if it's your own. So it's basically a likut from Rishonim or maybe early Achronim, that for different reasons for the mitzvahs d'Rabbanan. Some of them are very interesting reasons, which maybe you wouldn't find normally in the chinuch. For example, the Psikta says the reason you light Shabbos licht is so that a bug shouldn't fly into your food. Now that's not a mainstream, you were not going to find that if you look at Shulchan Aruch, right? So obviously the chinuch itself is also meant to be interesting. And then we'll have like the Mincha Ketana on the side.
You mean the chinuch, your chinuch?
My chinuch.
The chinuch in the Mincha Ketana.
Yeah. So let's call it the middle, right? We'll talk about this point. And, the Mincha Ketana will, elaborate and say, like, is there halacha during the week? You also have to have a candle because you're not allowed to eat bugs during the week either, right? So this type of discussions you're not going to find in any halacha sefer because it's just not there.
So now let me ask you something, but I think that explains the sefer just before we get into any example. So obviously you mentioned you have the Rambam, we know the Rambam, Sefer Mitzvahs, we have the Chinuch, we have all this Targum Mitzvahs, right? But as you mentioned, Mitzvahs Rabbanan, there is no number, and somehow I will mention there's 20 mitzvahs in this sefer. So for example, there's mitzvahs b'dikas chametz is one example, reading the Megillah on Purim, to be happy on Purim, Shalach Manes, Matanas Lev Yoini, those are all separate. You split them up. Now we have coming up Yom Tov of Chanukah, Daled Kaisos and Pesach, and there's more in here. Right? We're not going to go through all of them. So how did you pick this list of 20 mitzvahs? Where did you come up with, okay, I'm going to pick mitzvahs? What was the decision process in picking these mitzvahs here?
So I hate to disappoint. Unfortunately, there are no major deep calculations there. Unlike the Rishonim, who the many Achronim that came afterwards said they're figuring out exactly what they wrote. This is not so. I actually wrote this in Hakdama clearly. Don't try to figure out why I wrote it or why not. Hopefully there's more to come. We'll have other mitzvahs. Some of the mitzvahs, so like this, everybody knows there's 7 mitzvahs d'Rabbanan. It's not clear what the makar of that is. It's probably more Kabbalistic. Taryag plus 7 is Keser. It's not clear where the union of 7 mitzvahs d'Rabbanan is. In the back of the Chinuch, they did print 7 mitzvahs d'Rabbanan. It's not clear what those 7 mitzvahs d'Rabbanan are. I have at least 12 different Seforim that count completely different mitzvahs d'Rabbanan. So it's not like we had any specific mitzvahs that we could work off. Now, to count all mitzvahs d'Rabbanan is impossible. The Rambam writes in Sefer Mitzvahs that if you count all of them, you will get to thousands of mitzvahs. Allah from Rabbim, many thousands.
We don't mind. We can print that. That's not a problem.
That's for every Shimon to say. We will. But, we got to start somewhere, right? So I tried to pick things that are not just, there are plenty of mitzvahs d'Rabbanan that are not a persona geya to us nowadays, or mitzvahs d'Rabbanan that are, like for example, Erev, which maybe I hope in the next case to work on, but that will probably be triple the amount of any mitzvah here. What we did mitzvahs here were more like mitzvahs like Netilas Yadayim and Lich Benchen, mitzvahs that people could very easily relate to. And that's actually one of the points that I had with working on the Sefer, is it's something that could be an easy conversation piece for anybody. It's something that you could literally open any page and look at any point and have something to tell someone, the person next to you, after 2 lines. And you could try it out. Go right ahead.
It's called the Get Rich Quick Sefer. But I want to just, if you don't mind, just give an example. I know that I'm focusing too much on the chinuch over here, and really the point is the Minchas Chinuch. But I'm very fascinated with the creativity over here. Misharoshem, it says the mitzvah of lighting candles. Misharoshem mitzvah. Kitzivonu habayri yizbarach v'karos al Shabbos oynik v'liyos la'odom ner b'shas asuda hu roish l'chol oynik, and that he takes right out of the Meiri and Masech Shabbos. Ki al yodois ve'al b'chilosai Gemara and Yuma daf ein dalin and beis. These are not, most of us would not have found this right away in the Gemara. This is his brilliance putting it together. V'oid shema yipol zvuv macholi ve'ein reyeyu psikta zutrasi and b'shalach v'gamish m'sholim bayis. So he gives you all the reasons for mitzvah rabbanon. And this, you go straight to the sources. You have to learn the midrashim and the gemaras. It's not something you can pick up and say for a fine. V'oid kalidei shamad l'kner hu mechaber es haShabbos. Gemara Pesachim Dalin Beis Rambam Hilchos Shabbos Perek Lav Lachei Kederach shemadliken ner mekayim sachashuvim. V'oid shlo yav yad lechil Shabbos lechil mezenim stayich ner lechoil lechayim psiktu zutrasi. This is a brilliant likud on its own. And then you look at the side, you'll see the most interesting shilas that you could ever think about when you get to lighting candles. So I just want to read one example. I just didn't see this before. I'm looking right now. Yesh l'stapik. Misha hidlik lahaviv v'shachach v'yisira. A person prepares the lecht, right, before Shabbos. He lights it, and he left it burning like that. Im yotzi dechevasa. If yotzi yechir. No, I'm not going to tell you what it says over afterwards. I'm going to go by it and look at it. But that's an interesting shaila. Yet this is just one. There's 2 lines out of hundreds and hundreds of lines just on Bahalik Nera Chanukah. It's pleasant to learn from, and very, very, very fascinating and interesting.
So basically, what you're saying is that it's not a halacha sefer. It says this clearly in the introduction, and that's what you said also. But both of you, but it's not a halacha sefer. It's like in yeshiva, guys learn Minchas Chinuch. It's a geschmack limud. You learn it. You get more familiar with the subject. It's not, you're not learning this halacha, so to speak. Now let me ask you, Rabbi Juravel. You can pick up on that, but I mainly want to get to is, if you have a practical example, obviously we've been saying, but maybe you have an example here. It doesn't have to be Hanukkah's coming up, but it could be any of these are very relevant. Like you said, you tried to pick things that are familiar to people, relevant mitzvahs. You have an example of a chinuch and a minchas chinuch, more something you want to, another example you want to show from something that you, an example.
Great. So I'm going to pick up on what you spoke about halacha, and I'll answer your question also. Let's talk about Hanukkah for a second, okay? Everybody knows that on Hanukkah, the Shulchan Aruch brings down a minhag to eat milchiks, but that's it. Shulchan Aruch says clearly there's no chiyuv suda, there's no, we don't sit down and make kiddush and have a suda. We don't do that on Hanukkah. Hanukkah is, you could do it if you say Shir Mitzvah Brachos. Everybody knows that. Every Hanukkah party, people talk about this, right? So now, if you look inside, I'm talking about mainstream mechaber, nothing crazy, right? The Mishnah Berurah, the Pischei Tshuva, Shlomo Kluger, Meiser Rekech, regular mainstream mechaber in various places all say clearly that on Hanukkah there's a chiyuv basar v'yayin. Now, that sounds pretty amazing to anyone who learned any studios, but it's there. It says many times in many different places. The Rambam, the Marshal, there's Megillas Yavan, which is attributed to Hillel and Shammai by the Bahag and some Rishonim. Maybe some of your other guests could weigh in on that, but they all say clear that there's a chiyuv simcha. Now, there's 2 ways to approach this. There's a halacha way to approach this, and there's a, let's call it minchaketana, minchas way to approach it. The halacha way to approach it is to say like this: we know there's no chiyuv suda. We know that this is a fact. It's clear in Shulchan Aruch that there's no chiyuv. It's also clear that if you look around, you're going to find different places that have it. Some places they'll try to be matche and say it doesn't mean that. Some places they'll bleib shver, say tzarichin. I don't know why they say anything about basar v'yayin. Hanukkah doesn't have a chiyuv basar v'yayin. We don't know, but that doesn't change the halacha. In Mincha Ketana, we're going to do it the other way around. We're going to say like this: we have chinuch that the Chachamim told us to make a yom tov on Hanukkah. Now, what does it mean yom tov? So Mincha Ketana says, well, there's a chiyuv simcha. Bring down all the marmor kaimas. That's a chiyuv simcha. Right? And there's a Darkei Moshe and a Rabbeinu Yoina, Ala Torah, and Parshas Miketz, and many, many places. That's a chiyuv simcha. Not only that, there's also a chiyuv basar v'yayin. Basar v'yayin, like I mentioned, the Barahait, the Mishnah Berurah, and Shlomo Kluger, and Pischei Tshuva. Everyone says clearly in many different places. They're not all on the spot. Many of them are in other places. Some of them in Hilchos Tainis, there's in Hilchos Yom Tov, other places where they mention that there's a chiyuv to eat meat and drink wine on Hanukkah. Now, we'll say, and the Shulchan Aruch doesn't bring this, but it's a little bit rare. We have everyone assuming this for a pashtus, and the Shulchan Aruch doesn't say that. Now, that's not a halachadik approach. The halachadik approach is the opposite. But if you're trying to, let's call it interest someone, or you're trying to have someone come away with it, you're not going to remember. If you look it up in the Dirshu Mishnah Berurah, and it says, Shulchan Aruch says there's no chiyuv to eat, and they'll say, well, there are some places that's much, but there is, but I might say there isn't. You will not remember that. It's impossible. You already forgot it. Right? There's no way to remember that. But if you start the other way around, that there's many marmor kaimas that say there is a chiyuv, right? And the Shulchan Aruch doesn't say that. And instead they bring a minhag of basar v'yayin. Why is that? This is something that would definitely be remembered as something which is a conversation piece, something which could make things clear. So that's how the Yom Tov of Hanukkah starts off. The mitzvah of Hanukkah, that's how we have it, right? Now, obviously, being the Mincha Ketana, or trying to do Minchas Chinuch, obviously we're going to have to talk about these chayvas sudas, and we'll explain: is there a chayvas suda every day? Does it have to be a kazayis techidei chilas pras? Does it not? Okay, these are all things that are built on a suda, which the Shulchan Aruch doesn't even mention, which is not even true halacha. So you can't consider this a halacha sefer. Now, again, in the middle, let's call it the chinuch, right? We say, okay, that they said you should be neig yom tov, and you should be lahadlik ner echad lamachtes hashah. You should light one candle for a half hour. That is the halacha. That's the mitzvah d'Rabbanan. Now, obviously, in the sign of the Mincha Ketana, we're going to explain that there's other candles to do, and there's a din of mahadrin, and there might be a chiyuv to be a mahadrin, and maybe that doesn't make any sense. How could you have a chiyuv to be a mahadrin? And go through those type of things. I'll give you one example, a question which sounds ludicrous, but if you think about it, it makes a lot of sense. Everyone knows it's got to light for a half hour, right? What about if you have two candles that each one lights for 15 minutes? Does that work? Is that a good adlaka for a half hour? Well, you think about it, why not? Is that got to be at the same time? Hadlaka isi mitzvah. Yeah, it is. I lit it twice. Each hadlaka I did was for a full 15 minutes. Why does it have to be that the first minute already was for a half hour? Why does it have to be like that? Right? So again, these are kind of questions that if you ask a paisik, he'll laugh at you because it's not brought down in any halachas farm and there's nothing to talk about. So just don't do it and please light a half hour. Now again, I light a half hour. Please don't be, I light a full half hour candle. But this is things that are important, things that are that are important to clarify.
Another example of typical, I would say one of the most typical Minchas Chinuch shilas, type of shilah that is very compelling, but you never would have thought of it on your own. And once you hear about it, you can't stop thinking about it. I remember I picked it up the first time. I started looking in the midst of Chol HaMoed. So first of all, Chol HaMoed itself is debate whether it's the Rais Rabbanon, so it doesn't belong in the Sefer at all. But he has a shilah over there. Are women mechuyev in keeping Chol HaMoed? And he says, it's a mitzvah. What's the source of the mitzvah? It's a mitzvah Seishman Grama. Mitzvah Seishman Grama. Noshim Turais. If Noshim Turais, they shouldn't be obligated in the Chiyav of Chol HaMoed. There's a machlek sapoiskim about it. So he says, okay, but then if you have someone has to do malacha in Chol HaMoed, for example, you're supposed to go and do the malacha, maybe it's better to do it through a woman than through a man. Look it up, and I went, I showed it, I was in the Spanish looking, I told people, I said, why is he wrong? Why is he wrong? I know he's wrong, but why is he wrong? It's so compelling. It's the source of the mitzvah say women are butter. That's the kind of thing that the Minchas Chinuch would bring up, and here you have it on a mitzvah that he brought up himself.
I thought the customer was always right.
So first of all, for listeners, it's about 90 pages Sefer, so it's not a big Sefer. Now it's priced reasonably. I think so. Under $20. It's not prices now. Everyone knows all the prices. It's still even though it's nice. It's nice size. So it's a Minchas Chinuch size. It's a little bigger than your standard Sefer. So why? Let's get back to something important here. Why the decision? Why the decision, and actually for both of you, but let's start with R Juravel. R Szimonowitz, I'm sure, was also involved. Why the decision here to take the layout of the Minchas Chinuch, the font, the cover, everything, the Sefer, if you wouldn't know otherwise, it looks like the Minchas Chinuch down to the Mem Kuf on the side that's almost like the Machon Yerushalayim logo. Why the Machon Mincha Ketana? Why the decision to go that route?
So the truth is like this, as the generations go on, things just get, right? We had Rishonim and then we had early Achronim. These days, if someone writes a Sefer, the chances of that Sefer, I don't even mean receiving any attention, but the chances of that Sefer being actually learned and considered, it makes no difference how good your Chidushim are or aren't. The chances of that happening are extremely slim to almost non-existent. And the reason is, there are many reasons for that, but one of the reasons are because if you're a person who writes a Sefer, some of them are okay, G'day L'Adar, write a Sefer, but a regular person is writing a Sefer. You have a younger man, you have, someone who's maybe a little older, someone who's a Talmud Chacham, but what they could come up with is not that much better than anything that other serious learners could come up with. So very often what happens is someone puts out a Sefer. It could be full of great chidushim and whatever masechta they're learning or whatever inyan it is. And if someone would actually open it, they would probably find some things that are very compelling, things that they enjoy, but they don't even get to the first step. So this was maybe a little bit of an experiment. The experiment goes like this. We're going to have a Sefer that's not one person's ideas about the subject that he happens to be interested in. Rather, we're going to have a Sefer which is, first of all, has some kind of framework that it's emulating. So it's not like we're coming up with an idea ourselves. It's a framework that people know, people enjoy. It's gained wide popularity way beyond any other Sefer that we know by many circles. And if we go ahead and try and make a Sefer, not just with one person, meaning myself, although it was my idea, but when I have a Sefer, when I sit there writing a mitzvah, it's not like I come and there's no way one person can come up with this anyway. What happens is like this: I call anybody I know who's been learning for enough years that are interested in this type of stuff, and I'll say, okay, I'm writing on the mitzvah of Shalach Manas, right? What do you have to say on Shalach Manas? Something that I don't know. Go. And some people will say things that we know already. Some things will say, but someone will tell me, and then there's a chuvas 3 day that there's a mitzvah to give Shalach Manas every day. You're just not mechuyev to. But if you give it, you get the mitzvah Shalach Manas. Yeah, wow, okay, that's something. I don't believe it. Yeah, where is it? I look for it, I find it. It's there, right? Okay, there's no way I can know that. I don't know 3 day. How am I supposed to know that this person is interested in 3 day? We went. There's many other examples, such type of things. Someone, I was just thinking last year it happened to me. I gave someone Shalach Manas, and the guy fell asleep, and we didn't wake up till the end of Purim. Was I ate Shalach Manas? There we go. We got a question. After you have enough of those, and you have enough people, each mitzvah was written by at least 30 or 40 people, I would say, right? So although I did the framework, now if we do that and put that out as a sefer, like if we put it out as a sefer, that's within it looks like the framework of the Minchas Chinuch. It's the format of the Minchas Chinuch. We're going to have it, typeset in that way, the cover that way. It gives a person the feeling that they're learning a sefer that's not just written by a younger man or younger life, but rather was heavily researched and went through, which it was. Not only that, okay, we'll get to that Haskama soon, but it actually went through some Gedei Torah also. So it has, the legitimacy, not mamash the Minchas Chinuch, of course not, but it has the legitimacy of a very serious sefer with real. And again, we're not talking halacha. So, so that was the first step, to try and have it look like something that people know already and people trust.
But I want to ask you, because I've seen it and I've been asked this by people. So I'm asking what I've been asked is that, but like you're saying, it gives it a certain chashivas. Aren't you giving it that chashivas though? Aren't you saying this is the Minchas Chinuch, this is the font, this is the layout? It even has the side headers. Like, aren't you creating it as the Minchas that? But it's not really necessarily that. Meaning,
can I ask you a question?
Go ahead.
Chaim Kanievsky published the Derech Hamuna, right? He called it the Biur HaHalacha and Tzion HaHalacha. Chaim Kanievsky is a very creative person. I mean, obviously, the God Lador, besides for that. He couldn't think of a better, and he has very good names for his other Seforim. He has Nachal Eson, Orchos Yosher, Talmid Dekra, very creative names. He couldn't come up with a name better than Tzion HaHalacha. He was sending you a message. He was saying, I am trying my best. And obviously, Chaim Kanievsky's best, with all due respect, Rabbi Juravel, is, I would say, more than Rabbi Juravel's best, trying his best. But he's trying his best to do a Mishnah Brura on Zroim. He was very successful. We know that's, I think most people consider it as magnum opus. I use the sefer all the time. And that's a very important sefer. But I don't know if he ever would have given it that attention if he wouldn't have told us, just by the layout, this is supposed to be like the Mishnah Brura. The Badi HaShulchan did the same thing. And it's not just in layout itself. I'll give you another interesting example. The Minchas Shoal, when it came out, I don't know if you remember, it imitates the cover of a Baruch Ber Sefer. And some people found it funny. Like, why does it have to be exactly? I just recently redid the Minchas Shoal, and we had to recreate that design of the cover of the Berachas Shmuel. And if you've ever seen a Berachas Shmuel, it's not used because of the cover design. And we had to imitate that exact design. Now, why did the Minchas Shoal do that? Why did Shaul Bruce do that? He did that because he was trying to convey the message, I am trying my best to give you a somewhat of a version of Berachas Shmuel. And that means people who are interested in Berachas Shmuel will be interested in the Sefer. It's funny because when it came out, it was like a big tumult about that, why it imitated the cover. And I was a couple of years ago in the Professor, Rabbi, Dr. Schneer Lyman's house, and he showed us the first print of Reb Chaim. First print of Berachas Shmuel. And what's interesting is the first print of Berachas Shmuel didn't look like today's Berachas Shmuel, but guess what? It looked exactly like Chidush Rabbeinu Chaim Alevi, exact same cover, which means our Baruch Ber, when he was alive and he made his sefer, he says, I want you to know I'm giving you something similar to my Rebbe's Torah and doing that. So when you imitate your Rebbe or you imitate a format of a sefer, it's not a Talmud of the Chavetz Chaim, and neither is a Fayvel Cohen, but it's sending that message. And this has been done all the time and very successfully. And it's a good idea to imitate success. This was Rabbi Juravel's idea, but it was a very good idea. How are we going to tell people that by picking up this sefer, you're going to get our best foot forward of doing a Minchas Chinuch Mitzvah Rabbanon. This is the only way to do it. And believe me, everyone got that message. And now everyone's debating if it is exactly the Minchas Chinuch, less than Minchas Chinuch. I think if you get a 50% mark, you'll be happy too. And that's what it looks like when you pick it up. It's with permission, of course, of Machon Yerushalayim. As a matter of fact, it says in the inside page, it's the Ilyan Ishmas. It says over here, let's say the Zikaron like Gav Rabbi Akira Mekuravim Shalkol Del Yisrael Harav Goyin of Yosef Buxbaum Yas Rosh Machon Yerushalayim. This was done with the blessing of Rabbi Buxbaum's children, and obviously because we got the inspiration, and Rabbi Juravel got the inspiration from Rabbi Buxbaum. And I want to just go back. I know I'm taking a little bit too much airtime here, but this is a very good story. It's worth it. I want to go back to something that Rabbi Juravel mentioned before, that the Sefer has universal appeal even to Svardim. I was one time in Rabbi Buxbaum's house in Rechavia, and I was there. He was talking about his project, the Minchas Chinuch, that he was gonna get reprinted, which they did partially or all the way already with Ha'orim Ol Gedol Yisrael. And I was a Yigamal learning at Brisk at the time, and Rabbi Buxbaum told us the following story. He said that, can I say something a little political, or it's going to get us into trouble? That he said like this. He said that Rabbi Yosef approached him one day and said to him that Ani shamati she'ata matpis on the Minchas Chinuch. I heard that you're printing on the Minchas Chinuch. So he says, yeah, I am. So he says, come to me. I want to give you a whole kuntres that I wrote on the Minchas Chinuch. So he says, Ech magia larav dichtov ala mashu Ashkenazi katav. Why do you write something on Ashkenazi? Which wasn't a question on Rav Yosef, but he just obviously just joking with him. So Rav Yosef said, I'll tell you what the story was. It says, Melchemet HaShichrur was during the independence war in Israel, and there was Herpat Ra'ab. There was hunger in Yerushalayim. And Rabbi Zevin came to Yerushalayim with, I think, $10,000, or maybe 10,000 English pounds, I don't remember. And he was going to give it out to Talmidei Chachamim. So somebody told him, they're going to sit down and say, I have money for Talmidei Chachamim who are hungry in Yerushalayim. In one day, the money's gone. In those days. So he said, you know what? Anyone who tells me a piece of Minchas Chinuch Baal Peh gets a certain amount of money. So Rav Yosef said, Ani v'Rabbi Tzina b'Shaul yashavnu layla had lemadnu kol hasefer ve'eze misken halachnu kol hakesef. He lost all his money because they wiped him out. They both had photographic memories, and they wiped him out. This was Rav Yosef learning Minchas Chinuch. It's interesting, Rabbi Buxbaum said at the time that Reb Chaim Kanievsky, because of the politics, was because of Shachs Kpeda, he was makbid not to allow them to print Rav Yosef's ha'oris. He said that Rav Chaim Kanievsky even wrote him a letter that if you're going to print Rav Yosef's ha'oris, you can't have my father's stuff. That's what he said at the time. I hope it's not allowed to say the story, but that's the only time Rabbi Buxbaum, that's what he said. But that's about the appeal to the Svardim that he learned to Sefer. But definitely imitating something like that, it's been tried and proven. It's a good method, and there's nothing wrong with the method. And it's the only way of telling people loud and clear, this is what you're going to get right now. The inside's a chinuch, and the outside is a Minchas Chinuch. If you don't do that, no one's going to give you a chance to look at it.
Speaking of Sfardim, I'm not a Sfardi, I'm Ashkenazi, but I have many Sfardi friends. If you look up in one of the mitzvahs of Purim, mention an interesting thing. The Chida writes that the Gzeira of Purim was not done. The Gzeira of Purim was not nigzar on people who lived in Sfarad, because that was too far. It was most of the world, but it wasn't like Sfarad in those places and Africa. So obviously, I'm going to seize on that. So we write Gam Achenu as Sfaradim are mechuyev in Purim, even though there was no. So people said, "No, you sound racist. You can't do that." So I just showed it to my Sfaradi friend. They loved it. I mean, especially if coming from the Chida, who was the quintessential Sfaradi. So we left it like that. I think I made it. Maybe wrote it a little bit more. Politically correct, but it's there. If you want to tell someone over on Purim, this interesting fact, you know where to find it.
Interesting, and to go on this whole overall discussion here, imitation is the highest form of flattery, right? So obviously, and yeah, I mean, you always hear people. I mean, I've heard already. Oh, how could you copy Minchas Chinuch? But like you said, there's been I mean, Mishnah Brewers, I think I just saw on Girsa in Yerushalayim sends out emails, this farm store, and there was just another volume on Rambam, Hilchas Psulim Mikdashim, I forget to say his name, just the other day, and another Mishnah Brewer style. I can't tell you how many I see all the time. There's a number of these come out a year on the Mishnah Brewer. The Michashal is a good example also. I mean, this farm come out all the time, and I want to say, so obviously, you can copy this style. I think there was two parts. I mean, I guess you kind of answered. One part was just copying the style of the Chinuch with Minchas Chinuch, the middle with the around, and then the other part was just the cover layout font. And like you said, you have Rishus Machon Yishalayim. People asked, copyright, I think, but Machon Yishalayim gave you permission to do it. And so that's that with the style. Now, something that ties into the style overall, forget the font and the layout. Maybe we'll get back to Rabbi Szimonowitz, ask him a little bit about what goes into that. Literally, it's the same exact font. I don't think Rabbi Szimonowitz, I've been pretty familiar with your Seforim, and I never saw you use this exact font and this exact. So I'm curious about that, but we'll get back to that. You have a lot of Haskamas here. I think I counted 11 Haskamas. People publish Haskamas, but like a little overkill. I mean, why the decision to go for so many Haskamas? I mean, what was is that because of what we're discussing here? Was that why? I mean, what was the decision? What went into that?
So absolutely. I would refer you to Rabbi Shimanowitz's last episode with you, where he talks about Haskamas, and he points out that there's two reasons, if I remember correctly, it was a long time ago before I ever met him actually. There's two reasons why somebody would want Haskama mainly. Sometimes it's to show who you are, meaning I learned in this place, this is where I belong, this is, this person, this is the Rav of my shul, this is the Rosh Hashiva that knows me. You're just trying to, people enjoy learning Seforim, that they understand where the Mechaber is, coming from, who they are. That's one reason someone gets Haskama. Another reason someone gets Haskama is if it's a halacha sefer, it's to show that their halachas are correct and that someone could be samech on them. This is not a halacha sefer, and I was not trying to introduce myself at all, actually. So the reason for this is, like you mentioned, any sefer which is a new concept, it's a new idea, would need a lot of people backing it. That's number one. Number two is that very often Haskamas these days are written from templates, meaning people that are especially gedalet are not able to fully go through a sefer. They see 2-3 lines of a sefer. It looks okay. They'll write the generic Haskama. They have their electronic signature. And, this is, very, very often how it is. That's not to say that Haskamas are forged, but they don't say much. These Haskamas, although we do have a few of those over here, but most of the Haskamas were, people who actually went through it. Not only did they go through it, they went through it deeply. I have from most of the people who gave Haskamas, most of the Rabbanim that gave Haskamas, I have actual ha'aras. They told me, take this out, put this in. They went through the entire Sefer, which is very important. If you're going to back something, you can't back something. Imagine they look through it. It looks okay. And then we wrote something crazy. There's no way that anyone would give Haskama on such a thing. So if it's a sefer, if it's a, Varts on Al Taira, and someone spoke not the right way about light, so okay, they'll say, listen, I didn't go through the whole sefer. This was, looked good, and I'm sorry, this happens all the time. But such a sefer where you're having like a novel idea, and it's not like we tried to hide that we're copying Minchas Chinuch. I actually made sure to have a typeset first before I gave it to Haskama, so it shouldn't be like, oh yeah, you wrote something nice, and then you made it to Minchas Chinuch. No. Not only that, the Haskamas, you mentioned, you look through the Haskamas a little bit, I'm sure you noticed that they all mention it. Most of them mention it, that it's written like Minchas Chinuch. Some of them even mention the little side, whatever you call these things, right? Kaplach, like the style of the Chinuch and the Minchas Chinuch. Some went into more detail, some went into less detail, but nothing was hidden here. And that was really my point, to make sure that, although I did figure that if sales go really poorly, I could always have someone make a chayim against it, which would immediately boost sales. But Baruch Hashem, we didn't have to come on to that.
Just remembering now, you asked about Haskamas, you asked about the setup. There's a good precedent for this. The Sidrei Tahara from Razina Rebbe on Kalim and Ahalis is an imitation of a Gemara. And he actually collected also an enormous amount of Haskamas from all different chugim, all different groups. He went far away to Svardim, to Krakow, and to Hungary, and to Lithuania. He had Haskamas from everybody. As a matter of fact, anyone who ever read Rishon Sheshel's Beis Brisk knows that he has an interesting theory there. There's a Haskama on the Siddur Tahara, which is an imitation of a Gemara. There's no Gemara in Kalim, there's no Gemara in Alis. But he went and collected all the Gemaras on Kalim and Alis, and he made it in a format of a Gemara with a Hadron at the end. That you could, it looks exactly like a Gemara. And he wrote his own Rashi, and he wrote his own Taisvis. And so and there he's not imitating the Minchas Chinuch, who at the end of the day was an Achron. He's imitating the pillar of what we call Orthodox Judaism, which is the Talmud Bavli. And he's making his own Talmud Bavli. And he got this, everyone gave him very warm askamas for it. But there's a theory there that he went all the way to Moscow to get askam from Chaim Berlin. So why do you have to go to Moscow to get askam from Chaim Berlin? So the author of the Rishon Shel's Beis Bris has a theory that he was afraid that Netziv will come out against him. Netziv did not give an askam. From all the Gedolei Achroim at the time, they gave askam, Netziv did not. And there's some evidence, scant evidence, that the Netziv was actually against it because he didn't like the idea of imitating Gemara. There was a fear that if you can imitate a Gemara, that someone's going to say one day, maybe Masechtas Tamur was also just a project by the Radzina Rebbe. How do you know that that's a real Gemara? So that was the Netziv's misgiving about the Sefer. That's just a theory. I think the one on his last podcast. That's a theory. And then the Netziv went, and so he went running to Moscow to get Haskama from Chaim Berlin, the son of the Netziv. So now he knew the Netziv won't come out against him anymore, because he's not going to come out against Haskama's son. So here you have another example of a lot of Haskamas imitating the format and being afraid of people going against us. You want to make sure that everyone's buying into it before you come out with it. And here we had every single important Rav. I mean, actually every single part Rav. Very, very important Rabbanim. Every person that opens this up is going to have some affiliation with someone who approved of the Sefer, and didn't just approve. He's not going to read it himself. So I'm going to read it for you. Elia Bear writes something over here that's the most astonishing Haskama that I ever printed in my life, for sure. He writes, Hein huva lefane kuntres Mincha Ketana, v'talmidi Yaakov Juravel Yaakov Juravel Shlita, v'nishtoimameti alamar. I was shocked. I did not believe there's anybody in our times who's capable of putting together such a sefer with such broad erudition and all the details of every mitzvah. Ado diktuka achron, and the chidushim are amazing. Hodek, heitek, hodek. It says in comparison to Mechabrim of Mikadmis Dana, of from years and years ago. And then he says in the end, he writes, look at the Marcheshes Akdama, who is critical of the new Derech HaLimud, and I am sure that anyone who sees this Sefer will not, if he said, I'm sure that if the Marcheshes would have seen this Sefer, the Marcheshes would have seen Rabbi Juravel Sefer, he would not have complained about the new Derech HaLimud, because he sees people still capable of writing Seforim like that. So with Haskama like this from Rabbi Yeber, I don't think anybody could say another word. That's the final word on the subject. And there's everybody here. There's a Mechel Zilber, you have Harfanis, you have a Shmuel Deutsch, Rabbi Forsheimer. He's a very, very warm Haskama. And he also wrote Ha'aris himself, right? Rabbi Yocham Olshin. I'm just reading some. Rabbi Yitzchak Sorotzkin. You have Rabbi David Meir, Shlomo Feivel Shustel. He's printed one of the last, but that's because it came in very late Haskama. Not that in any way that it's less important than the others. And yes, Eretz Yisrael B'Ig Rabbanim is an unbelievable amount of Haskamas, and Haskamas are very, very effusive, much more than a typical Haskama. Like you said, there's like some of the templates Haskamas. I can show you my drawer. I have Haskamas signed, one of the Gedolei Yisrael, empty page. I can fill whatever I want there.
Yeah, they were. I did read it over on Shabbos, and they are more effusive. They definitely talk more. I've read Haskamas. I've opened up a sefer. You look at Haskama, and you're like, "What'd you print? This is a fake. It doesn't even say anything. You know, there's nothing going on." I would mention also, Rabbi Shimon mentioned the Siddur Tahara. Also, earlier one was Shlomo Szimonowitz, Marash Silio did on Edges. Avat Shalom published that. So that's something else.
I mentioned the Siddur Tahara in the Akdama, and as well as the Rash Sirilio. I mentioned the Akdama, just like all these Gedolei Yisrael, like the Rash Sirilio. And the Rashi really did not think he was a Tana. He just wrote it anyway, right? The Chavetz Chaim wrote a riff, right? These are things that's been done.
Yeah, exactly. And I just want to say, I don't mean to make such a big deal about this, just because I not only that I assume that people ask this, I've been asked this. It's been mentioned to me about the Sefer, so I want to bring it up. Once we're doing a podcast about the Sefer, I mean, let's confront this head on and have this discussion, because I know people are gonna be like, well, how did you had this machaber on you? You didn't talk about this? No, we talked about it. And I wanted to make sure that we discussed that. So I want to ask Rabbi Szimonowitz though about the font. I mean, what goes into that? I'm sure it's interesting. Like, you literally got that Machon Yerushalayim font. I mean, with everything, like everything exactly down perfect. I mean, like I said, I don't think you can correct me. Did you ever use this in another sefer? Like, how does that work? Like, you need this font, you have to go and get it. Do you have to buy it? How does that work?
I hope that Rabbi Juravel won't ask me for a discount, but it's actually very basic fonts over here. The Sefer, we're taking Minchas Chinuch, which is an old project I mentioned without dating myself. My mitzvah people are getting this as presents, so it's not such a new font. It's been around forever. It's not hard.
That's when it came out.
It's not a big deal. This the Sefer. How old are you, Dr. Minchas? But it's not a big deal. And the cover was a little bit harder to do, but the cover is not exact, and we purposely made it not exact, right? It shouldn't really be exact, but it's not so complicated as it looks. It's just a matter of time to go and find the right size, and it should match up. The main thing is the person picks it up, he knows what he's looking at. He knows that this is going to be a mincha ketana at the style of Minchas Chinuch.
Now, we'll get back to Rabbi Szimonowitz with a couple of final questions before we end the episode, but let me ask you, Rabbi Juravel, basically to end the discussion about the Mincha Ketana. So you mentioned there's 20 mitzvahs, number of mitzvahs. I mean, is there plans right now? Have you started working on other ones? Do you have something, just not examples, just the names of mitzvahs that you've, maybe thinking of working on, started work on? Will there be more volumes coming out?
So, it's not what I do full time. Let's just say this. I actually told somebody, I write Mincha Ketana when you learn it. Like you're not learning your first aid, right? You're learning it when it's like you have a minute. That's when I write. Again, any mitzvah I work on is a major collaborative effort. There are plans for Chelik Beis. We're actually in the middle of working on it. We have, we're doing maybe the mitzvah of Chinuch. So that's actually Rabbi Shimonowitz's suggestion. Mitzvah of Chinuch, which is really an all-encompassing mitzvah because it talks about almost every mitzvah. There are a lot of nafkaminas. There's a shittas that you become bar mitzvah exactly to the minute after 13 years after you were born, which would make a funny thing because someone could actually become bar mitzvah when he's in the middle of saying Asher Yatzar. So does he continue or does he stop? Or this is a lot of fertile ground for these for this mitzvah. The mitzvah of Erev. There's other mitzvahs. People actually, I get, I got many letters from many chashuva people and not such chashuva people, and all sorts of, suggestions and phone calls and stuff like that. So one of the things that people are very fond of doing, it seems, is giving me ideas for mitzvah. Someone asked me to write about Kriyash Mashalamita, and if that's a mitzvah or is it not, or mitzvah l'kayim divrei hameis, someone wanted. It's actually a taisis in Ksubas Pevav that says mitzvah l'kayim divrei hameis is a mitzvah d'Rabbanan that you're kaifa on, you force that. That's a regular mitzvah d'Rabbanan. The people have many interesting ideas. Not sure how many we'll implement, but we're definitely working on. To my count, I see it going. The Rambam says there's thousands, but I see maybe 60 mitzvahs or so. There are mitzvahs that you wouldn't imagine. For example, everybody knows you have to do Tarek mitzvahs deraisa, right? Do you know that one of those mitzvahs is ladun benizkei shar, which is really a mitzvah on Bezdin, that if a shar kills somebody or hurts somebody, you have to adjudicate that. Or ladun benizkei bar, that's another mitzvah. Ladun benizkei ever. There's different differentiation, but the way the Chinuch has it, which is the Rambam's minion, that's how it is. So in Mincha Ketana, we actually have ladun bedine garmi, which is a derabbanan form of doing a hezek, right, of adam hamazik, but it's a derabbanan form. So we have ladun benizkei garmi, which we go through all the places that are machlekes in and what is garmi and what is not. That actually helped me out. That got me askoma for Pshalom Feivel and others because they actually enjoyed the more heavy stuff. I got a letter today actually from Chaim Tzvi Relic on the mitzvah of Garmi. That's what he liked. That's what he's going through with all sorts of. So that's the answer to your question, is that we are Be'ez Hashem working on another chelik. Try to speed it up, but these things take time. It took a couple of years, but we'll definitely try and speed it up. And
you should know that you said about Dina de Garmi. It's important to know that Rabbi Juravel like I wrote Dina de Garmi because I was once by a simcha. Rabbi Eli Baruch spoke Bach Finkel, and he said he came to Lakewood once to say a shir, and he said a shir on Dalal Kaisis. He said a shir on Dalal Kaisis. So after the share, Rabbi Kreiser came over to him. He says, "What? You say a share of Dalet Koises?" He says, "Of Shibud Daf Mizon." He's saying a heavy-duty sugya. So yes, there's a mitzvah of Dalet Koises here, but it's good to know there's also a mitzvah of Vod the Medina the Garmi, and he's coming with Erevin. There's also some heavy-hitting ones. But I'm sure you have listeners of all kinds. So the ones that want the Garmi, they should go get the Sefer Garmi and Erevin and Eretz Hashem. And then you have also Ner Shabbos, which is a bit of a lighter mitzvah.
Let me ask you, Rabbi Szimonowitz, when you're working on a sefer, what's the difference between working on a sefer like this, where you have the middle and you're on the outside and you have to put fonts and layouts? Is something harder rather than just typing up and publishing somebody's? I'm not comparing like a teichen, the content of one sefer to another. I mean, just like when you're actually laying out, is this like a more complex job for you, or no, it's not? It's just no difference.
Yes, it is a more complex job. It's called multi-text. It's just the technical thing. The more text you juggle on the page, in this case, you're really juggling 3 texts plus the sidebar on the side, because since there's something in the middle and on the side, it's just a little more. It's very boring and technical for your listeners. But it is more complicated. Obviously, someone writes chidushim, just like the style of, let's say, the Kilos Yaakov, which goes one simon after the next. That's the easiest, and this is more complicated and more difficult. But it's not. It's not a Mikrois Kedolos. It's not that level of difficulty, which is also easy. Can be done, and it is being done. That's not a big deal. But it also sometimes comes imitating someone else's work isn't that easy, because we want to make it look the same, and there are so many little things they don't even notice that makes it. And I've already gotten comments from people that you did a good job, but the first letter in each paragraph is bigger than they have in the Mechayim Shalayim, so you didn't do a perfect job. So, but that's not the point anyway. The point is the person picks it up and he gets what it's like. He's familiar with this format and he knows how to use it.
Now, I want to ask you, Rabbi Szimonowitz, again, something since we last spoke, and this is fairly recent. You started two things. One is less, and one is a bigger deal. One is you have a nice.
Everything I do is a big deal.
Well, you have a website. I mean, everyone has a website. It's a question of why.
They haven't seen my website. You kidding me? My website's the best website ever. So.
Yeah. Okay, so first of all, you have a website. I mean, what's on your website? I'll like I said, I'll link to the website. I'll put your email also for Rabbi Juravel, the Machon Mincha Ketana email. So if anyone wants to contact either of you, I'll put those emails in the show's notes with the website, with Machon Aleh Zayis website, and also I'll try to include a link to purchase Mincha Ketana. I don't know from which Seforim store. Just tell us
on the website. On the website.
Your website, you can buy. You purchase the Mincha Ketana.
Sure.
Okay, so we'll link to your perfect. We'll link to.
Nachi, I got permission from my distributor. I'll tell you that. My distributors is a bookshop, but they said, you know what? We got to keep up well with Rabbi Szimonowitz. We'll let him put it on his website.
So people can go to Israel Bookshop. So people go to Israel Bookshop's website also. Okay, I just want to, or
why would they do that? They come to Aleh Zayis. I don't get you're saying.
Or your local farms. Okay, 1 second. Aleh Zayis. No problem. Fine. Now I just want
one option. Let's just to be clear. One option. Aleh
Zayis. In your local farm store has the Sefer also. Now you have a website. Let's actually split the question simply. Why do you decide to put out a website? I mean, what can people find on the website?
Okay, so why I decided to put out a website is a few things. First of all, you can't deny the fact that even the yeshiva world is moving more and more, especially after COVID. Things I can tell you from before COVID and after COVID, that the electronic payments, it went. So many more people started paying electronically. It used to be the average person writing a sefer is not sitting by computer all day. He's not sitting in the world of in the digital age, but COVID brought people to digital age. And so before, when I was telling people, the option you can pay by Zelle, they looked at me with a blank stare what that is. Now they're asking me, can I pay you by Zelle? So there's definitely a huge change, especially after COVID. And people expect to find you online. People hear your name. They say, okay, I'll just go home, I'll Google you, and I'll find you. So, for example, right now, I don't know how many people are finding me by just Googling, printing Seforim, but people who do know me and they want to contact me or they want to find out more information about me, they put an Aleh Zayis into Google and they find it, and it's been very helpful. So first thing, just simple, have an online presence. That's a no-brainer for anyone who has a business. But besides for that, there's also, it's just a practical matter. Someone says, can I see this sefer, that sefer? Can you show me samples of what you've done? It's all out there on the web. Anyone can go there, see our work, see the kind of cover designs, insights, Seforim, and see what it's like. Another thing that I did over there was that people can sell their Seforim. So for example, a lot of my work, I would say the bulk of the work that I do, is people putting out contrasim. Very often for simchas, they want to. The person makes a mitzvah, he wants to put out his chidushim, or somebody wants to just tonight someone's getting married, and the grandfather was not alive anymore, so they want to publish the Chidushim from the grandfather. I've done 2 of those this week, a kuntris, and that's not a kuntris that's going to make it to the stores. It's not going to be widely distributed, but people want to have the possibility of sending out an email to their friends and relatives and say, you can buy it here. So I give them that opportunity by posting it on my website, and it makes it easier for them to be able to try to sell their Seforim and get it out there. And what I gain out of that is that they're essentially sending out my website to more people, and the person goes to buy it there, they find out more things about what I'm doing. So it's the online presence, it's the practical of having my stuff available for people to see easily, and there's the opportunity of selling Seforim. I don't foresee that being a big business, making money of selling Contrasim and Seforim, but it's helping the people who are putting out the Contrasim, and therefore it's a reason why they would want to do it and go on.
Right, it's giving them more of a service, more of a reason to use you. It's another resource for them besides for just the work on the Sefer that you do. Now the other thing I want to mention that is a bigger deal in my mind, I think it's very nice, I'll tell this to you. You started a gilyon. You started doing a weekly newsletter, newspaper, whatever you want to call it, every week. I mean, what explain to the listeners, obviously, where can people see it? Because obviously we're doing this just audio, so you can't see this. So what does it have in this gilyon, and why did you decide to go about this?
Okay, so the gilyon is as follows. The gilyon, everything a person does is a reason why he does it, but after he does it, it's not necessarily why he continues doing it. So the gilyon was a few parts of the few reasons why I wanted to make the gilyon. First of all, just by the way, before I had Machon Aleh Zayis, I was involved in the publication of Chitzei Gibarim. I started it, and so I've always had it in me to disseminate, chidushim from the.
Chitzei Gibarim is a journal that, I don't know if people know, like a Yeshurun kind of Torah journal.
And that was my successor did that. When I was doing it, it was more of a yeshivish collection of Chedush Torah from the Galai, Rosh Yeshivas, and it was very popular in the yeshiva. And that was something that's really where I got that was my first initiative in doing these kinds of things. So that's just for that itself, I would enjoy putting out a gilyon with Chedush Torah inside of it. But besides for that, so first of all, it's a good advertisement. Now, I got a lot of flack from people that I'm using shuls and sending out my gilyon for advertisement. So I'd like to mention one of the people I was involved in publishing the Sefer wrote a Sefer on Shtari Adyotis, and there is no question of the halacha. There's no shaila whatsoever that you're allowed to take a gilyon with hash Chedush Torah, even though people will now know more about my business. There's no isser involved in that. As a matter of fact, there are poskim who hold that you could even put regular advertisements on Shabbos where people could read it, even though it's usually also to read advertisements on Shabbos. But you're allowed to do it if it's a dvar mitzvah. For example, a person selling a sroigim or Seforim, you're allowed to do that. So but I am very careful not to put any advertisements inside of it. I'm not saying I'm going to stick to it, but as of now, there's never been any advertisement in there like you can buy this here, you can order this over here. It's just Chidush Torah inside of it. But obviously, it helps people have name recognition. They know that who's putting out the Chedush Torah. It says the name of the company on it, so you know that we're doing it. So that's the Shalai Lishma involved in it. Another Shalai Lishma involved in that is, it's again an incentive. A person knows that if he publishes a Sefer with me, he's going to have his Sefer, an excerpt of his Sefer in the gilyon. For example, the Mincha Ketana, we had already one time, and I don't run things more than once, unless it's in 2 languages. So the Mincha Ketana, we ran it once, a piece in English, like an English translation of the Sefer. The Sefer is in Lashon Kodesh, but we ran an English translation, and then we'll run it again, an excerpt in Lashon Kodesh. That's the most I would do twice. So people see all the Seforim coming out, people interested in Seforim see it, and I try to find things that are interesting. We also have articles written by the members of the Machon, people working in the Machon. They also publish articles, some very, very interesting article. We have now a whole series on the International Dateline going on with that. We're back and forth. This week was a very interesting one about Lubavitch's position on the International Dateline. And that's the second thing, to give people incentive to publish with me. Then that's an opportunity for, like I said, there's this Lishma part as well. It turned out at the end of the day that it was more of I would say it's more successful as a branding than actually people, thinking I'm going to go print my kuntris because he's going to put in an excerpt of it in the Sefer. It worked out more that it gave people a very strong name recognition of this Machon, and they take it much more serious. So it was successful in that way. And I find the biggest success is the enjoyment. People really look what it says over there. I'm a falcon. They write letters about it. And we try to take quality stuff, some Lashon Kodesh, some English, and that people are interested. I send an email out to 800 and something people. I send it out by WhatsApp as well. And it's in Lakewood. You can find it in all the shuls. They get distributed in the shuls. That's where it is right now.
That's the one thing I'd ask you if someone's listening. And I say I've looked at it. You send it to me, WhatsApp, email. I do enjoy looking at it sometimes when I get a chance. So where can people? Someone wants to get it, like you said, a physical copy, or just email, WhatsApp. How can people get in touch? How can they, if they're interested in seeing it?
They can contact me and they can get it. No problem.
So
you set my information up. They send in a request. They want to be on the list. They'll get it every week.
Okay, so I think that basically does it. I will one last thing from Yaakov Juravel is that I want to point out is that I did mention, and you mentioned, usually you don't initiate projects, but recently 3 Seforim came out with the same cover, the same layout, and they have Aleh Zayis on it. There's a Sefer on Tefillah, and you did 2 a drasha of Yaakov Emden and a drashas of the Machzah Shekel that you did. Is that something that you're looking into going into? I mean, we could talk more about those individuals from maybe another episode. Now we don't want to, drag on this episode, but just to finish up, is that something that you're looking to, that just maybe go into more or no?
So I'm not against doing it, but right now that's not my main focus. My main focus is servicing people. Mechabrim want to get their Seforim out, whether it's an amazing project or important project like Mincha Ketana, which prints in the thousands, or whether it's a kuntras, which is 30 pages and 20 copies. I'm interested in both of that, 100%. That's what my main focus is. Each one of those Seforim is a story behind it, why I did it. And they were Seforim that we initiated the idea behind the project, but there's always a story behind it. I am not right now looking to necessarily focus on that. But if someone brings me a project, like I said, I think I can do the same job as any of the other mechanics can do, as long as but the difference is also they raise the money, you have to pay it. I think there's one line that I said on your last podcast that I got back so many times. I'm not going to repeat it again, but it just came up in the conversation. And I think that the point was that a lot of people can trace him. And Rabbi Juravel mentioned before that he mentioned that it's very hard to get your Sefer out today. And he's giving different svaras why. It's very simple why it's very hard to get your Sefer out today. It's simply supply and demand. People who write Seforim today are amazing Seforim. There's nothing wrong with their Seforim. Their Seforim are phenomenal. Most people who publish Seforim are writing excellent. I mean, of course, there are exceptions, but most of them are excellent Seforim. It's just that there's so many Seforim. There's a bunch of Seforim in case. You can't cover them all. So it's very, very hard to get ahead of the pack. That's very, very, very challenging. And that's why people are not willing to raise funds to print those Seforim. They have to come to me and pay me for doing it. And that's the way, and that's the relationship that we have. But if somebody wants to initiate a project, which is an important project, then the other, of course, I'm happy to do that. It's fair to say that I get more enjoyment out of a Sefer that's actually going to go out in the world. But I also get an amazing enjoyment out of having your Ingerman. Sometimes that you see, not just Ingerman himself, sometimes you see a lot of dedicated wives that are very involved in their husband's Seforim. Sometimes the wives are so dedicated, they don't want their husband to waste any time, that it's not once that I have that a woman comes to pick up the box of Seforim, schlepping it herself for her husband, not because he made her go schlep it. It's because she wants him to sit and learn and be mechadish chidush and not waste another minute. And unfortunately, I have to be the one who has to go schlepping it out for her then. But that's they should know that they should come. I also like to learn a little bit, but they should come themselves to pick it up. But at the end of the day, you see unbelievable how a Torah when your mom puts out a Sefer. So even if it's not going to be as popular, but it's very, very chaved and very, very important. But of course, there is something about putting a Sefer that hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people are going to talk about. I mean, fallible, and I have no question that the Mincha Ketana is definitely high up there.
So thank you, Rabbi Szimonowitz. Thank you, Rabbi Juravel, for joining me.
Can I say a word to your listeners?
Go ahead, absolutely.
Being that this is, like I mentioned, a little bit of a collaborative effort. Any suggestions as for future mitzvahs or anything to improve? We not only take suggestions, we're a little bit built on suggestions. So if any listener has a suggestion that's worthwhile, I would suggest that at least take a look at the Sefer before suggesting. But after they do, we will definitely, very appreciated. All suggestions very appreciated.
Okay, so like I said, thank you, Rabbi Szimonowitz. Thank you, Rabbi Juravel, for joining me. And I'll include, like I said, contact information, a link to the Sefer and the website, all that information in the show's notes.
Yeah, very popular. We had someone giving it out by his bar mitzvah now. We have a couple of corporate people giving it out by their offices. We got a school here in Lakewood giving out to their rabbeim. You know what I'm saying? I'm just, just in case you don't think of it.
I would say, I have to say this is true, by the way. We did 1,000 copies first, and I was like, okay, let's see what happens. We started printing another 2,000 before the 1,000 even got here, even before I printed Eretz Yisrael before it even got here, and we're not even finished delivering the 2,000 distributors. Already asking for more. So the success is something beyond what I'm usually used to in this kind of Seforim.
Yeah, like I said, it's very nice. It's like I said, it's novel. It looks like the Minchas Chinuch. It looks the same. Like I said, with the current inflation prices, it's definitely it's reasonably priced. I mean, it's not, like I said, even though it's not a thick Sefer, but it is larger than your standard Sefer, and as it's priced under $20, very nice. So anyone wants to check it out, they can check it out if that's what if you're interested in it. And I will post, like I said, link, contact information, etc. So thank you both very much once again for joining me.
Thank you.